Hey there fellow adventurers, I'm Sunshade and today we're going to take a look at the Nokhud Offensive dungeon and talk about all you should know about it, what to dodge, what to interrupt and how to complete the dungeon in time. This guide is part of a playlist containing all of the Dragonflight Mythic Plus dungeons with updated mechanics for Season 4, so if you're interested in more of this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep updated on every new video and live stream. My dungeon routes can be found on the Keystone Guru website and I will post the links to them in the description below. And you can also grab my player profile over there as I use it to have an easier time remembering which spells I actually need to interrupt. Going off into the dungeon, this is a dragon riding dungeon, so you will need to mount on your dragon riding mount and go to the first boss area, which is Granyth, the dragon boss. Here we need to kill the 3 packs protecting the lances in order for the boss to come down. The packs are pretty dangerous, so be careful with the patrols and don't pull bigger than your group can handle. The Nokhud longbows cast Shoot, dealing physical unavoidable damage which you can CC in order not to get overwhelmed right at the start of a pull. They also cast Rain of Arrows, but less frequently than they used to in previous patches. Try to sidestep this as much as possible or CC the cast. The Nokhud Horn Sounders cast Rally the Clan, buffing nearby trash mobs, so you should keep this CC'd as well, and make sure to nuke these down as priority targets. The Plane Stompers cast a Disruptive Shout you should interrupt as it deals AoE damage and interrupts spellcasting, and the Lance Masters have the same ability. They also cast Cleaving Strikes, a frontal cleave, so DPS make sure to not be in front of them. Along with their cleaving strikes, they also have a War Stomp, a big swirly that stuns and does a lot of damage. The Beastmasters will summon Ohunas and place a Hunter's Mark on a random player, which the Ohuna will fixate and attack, so kite or CC the birds. The War Spears charge at ranged players with Swift Stab, leaving behind a physical dot on their target, and you can protect yourself by placing a Ring of Peace, Binding Shot, or a Vortex beforehand. They also cast Pierce on the tank, leaving behind a stackable bleed effect. After you clear the 3 Lance Masters, the boss will come down. The priorities in this fight are the adds and the Dragon Killer Lances, so start by slowing, stunning, and killing his add spawns as fast as possible before they reach the lances on the side and dismantle them. If you manage to keep the adds on top of the boss, that's even better as you can more easily cleave. The add will try to attack the lance that's getting ready to be used, which you can see by the timer above it. When the lance is ready to use, it will start glowing, and then you can click it to shoot a lance at the boss, stunning him for a few seconds, thus interrupting his casts as well. And it will also take 5% of his health, so make good use of the lances throughout the fight. It's best if a ranged or mobile player uses the lances as much as possible. The healer also works if he's not too busy healing. The boss has pretty simple abilities like a Tectonic Stomp you need to get out of as it hurts and pushes you back, and on 100 energy, Granyth will cast Eruption, which does increasing damage the longer it's up, and that's the ability that needs to be stopped with the use of the lances. You don't really have to try and time these as the lance is ready just in time to interrupt his eruption early if you don't have adds to damage it, and if you're slightly ahead of time, it will just force the boss into skipping the eruption cast entirely, restarting the timer for the next one. Also, if you use the lances as soon as possible, you may get an extra one by the end of the fight, helping you gain a couple of extra seconds on the timer. When Granyth is down, hop onto your dragon riding mount yet again and fly towards the next area where you will have to clear some specific packs again in order for the boss to become available. This time there are 4 packs with named Stormcallers and a totem which you can see on the minimap more easily. The named Stormcaller mobs all have the same abilities, starting with Stormbolt, a cast you can interrupt, and more importantly, clear out the totems quickly to avoid the mob's totemic overload casts, which deal AoE damage to everyone nearby but also spawn lightning orbs which you can run over in order to gain a stackable healing and damage buff. The Primalist Storm Speakers cast Tempest, dealing a lot of AoE damage and also placing a stackable dot on the entire party. Interrupt this spell as soon as possible, and the healers can dispel the dot if the channel goes on for too long. These mobs also summon Unstable Squalls, which cast Surge. You can interrupt this with whatever spare interrupts you may have. The Arcblades are low priority mobs and they cast Arcing Strike, dealing nature damage to their target, which then hits another target within 6 yards for 25% of the initial damage. There are also some other packs patrolling the area, one containing Primal Gusts, little elementals which you can just purge or mass dispel the shield off of and easily cleave them down. The Thunder Beast patrol can be quite difficult in fortified weeks, and you may want to move out even as a melee if you see it casting Chain Lightning on you, as it will cleave onto nearby players. Also move out of Thunderclap as it deals a lot of damage and stuns players caught inside it, but also interrupt his Thunder Strike spell, which hits really hard. The Primal Storm shields accompanying the Thunder Beast have a 25% shield, which if left unbroken for 12 seconds will do AoE damage to your party, so make sure to purge it and cleave them down quickly. Once the 4 totem packs are cleared, the boss will become attackable. He will occasionally cast Energy Surge, buffing himself with speed and nature damage, and you should purge this as much as possible. Protection warriors even used to be able to spell reflect this, so try it out. Lightning orbs will also spawn around the boss, just like they did around the totems in the trash packs, so spread out in order to cover all the areas. Run over the orbs to stack up the damage and healing buffs, and don't let the orbs reach the boss, as they will otherwise buff the boss instead, increasing his damage done by 5% per stack for a minute and releasing a Surge of Power AoE attack. For whatever orbs you can't reach in time, you can clear them out with the circles you get from the Lightning Strike attack, which will also deal damage to everyone in it, along with destroying the orbs. So don't stack up with this and dodge the swirly the orbs leave behind. In order to keep your buffs up from the orbs, you can take an extra one once in a while to refresh your stacks, while also letting the other party members get their buffs stacked up, especially your healer. Tanks should not walk too far out of range of the boss to soak, as the boss will start inflicting 100% extra damage to them, basically nuking down the tank with Wind Burst. It is pretty important to let your healer reach 10 stacks of the orbs buff early on as much as possible, especially right before the boss casts Electrical Storm, a very hard-hitting AoE channel. Rotate defensives on this along with healing cooldowns, especially in tyrannical weeks. This boss is also where most groups choose to use their second Bloodlust, the first one being used on the first pack of the dungeon. Moving on towards Teera and Maruuk, same as with the previous bosses, in order to spawn them, you need to clear out some specific packs of mobs around the area, and those are the packs containing the named Soul Harvesters on top of the hills, which again you will be able to see on your minimap. These all cast Death Bolt Volley, which deals AoE damage to the whole party if left uninterrupted. Their second attack is Shatter Soul, dealing damage and splitting the souls of 3 players, making them deal 30% less damage, so you will need to find your ghost, so to speak, and walk over it to recover it. The Death Speakers cast an uninterruptible chant of the dead all around them in a green swirly, and this will deal damage to any player caught within it, so move out of it, and it will also enrage all of the mobs inside it with a 20% damage buff and 20% damage taken reduction. So tanks, make sure to kite the mobs out or use spells like Ring of Peace or Typhoon to try and push the mobs out of the swirlies before the end of the cast. If you fail to do that, you can soothe any mobs that may have remained within it. However, this cast is really long, so you have all the time in the world to get out of it. Or as my friends do, they get out of it and get back in it because they thought it passed, but it didn't, so they get clipped by it anyway. So make sure you look at the cast and don't come back too early. Now, the Beast Callers are no longer worth their percentage this patch, as their spells have been slightly altered, now summoning 5 adds instead of 3 with their Desecrating Roar, which can no longer be interrupted, and the adds also don't give trash percentage, so you basically have a large pack of mobs, which is not really worth killing. Their other attack is Sundering Slash, dealing high damage to the tank and increases their physical damage taken by 20%, so try to avoid them as much as possible. Probably the most important change in this whole dungeon for Season 4 has been done to the desecrated Ohunas, the birds flying around this area, which often get pulled into the packs if you are not careful. Their Rotting Wind attack used to be a frontal you could easily dodge, however, it has now been changed into a massive AoE dot to the entire group, which applies a debuff per cast, so it stacks but it doesn't really refresh the old one, as it stands at the moment of making this video. It is a brutal dot, so it's absolutely vital to interrupt this cast with the utmost priority. With Season 4, these have also been given an anti-sync tech, so they will not all cast at the same time, making it even more difficult to AoE CC them. The Corruptors cast interruptible death bolts and channel a necrotic eruption which deals damage to any player who stands in the big green orbs, so dodge them or just CC them. The Mystics cast Swift Wind, empowering their allies with a 20% haste buff, which you can also purge or mass dispel, as it is a magic buff. But the much easier solution is to interrupt it. The Risen Warriors are the last mobs in this area, and they have a Mortal Strike attack which will deal damage and reduce the tank's healing received by 30% for 6 seconds, so don't pull too many of them at the same time. After clearing all the heal packs with the named mobs, one of your party members should quickly go close to the boss area and start the roleplay, while the rest of the group clears more packs for percentage. This is the best area to get extra trash percentage in, as the trash mobs here are in general less dangerous than those of other bosses, but they're also positioned closer to each other so you can pull several packs together. The next boss is formed of Maruuk and Teera, who are connected with lifelink, meaning they share health, but also if they are more than 15 yards away from each other, they gain Ancestral Bond, a stackable buff which makes them deal 10% increased damage per stack, and it stacks up quite fast. So tanks, make sure to kite Maruuk to Teera as soon as possible when she does her Spirit Leap and starts casting Quick Shot at random targets. You can already see where she is going to leap, as the ground effect will be all ghostly, so you can pre-move the other boss there while she is still casting. The leap will do no damage to you when she lands, so all of this is really great for cleaving. Meanwhile, Maruuk casts Frightful Roar, dealing damage and fearing anyone caught within it, so quickly move out of it. He also casts Brutalize on the tank, so make sure to pop a defensive. Occasionally, Teera will also cast Repel, pushing back all players, and she will follow this with a Guardian Wind cast, which you should interrupt. On 100 energy, Maruuk will cast Earth Splitter, spawning swirlies on the floor, which will erupt after 2 seconds, dealing very large amounts of damage to anyone standing in them, so quickly move out. Be careful if this happens at the same time as the pushback from Teera. When she reaches 100 energy, she will cast Gale Arrow, placing arrows on 4 players, which will then deal damage and spawn 4 tornadoes moving outwards from the players' locations. You can either spread out really well to dodge the tornadoes coming from other players, or better yet, pixel stack as much as possible and then move away when they're out, as the tornadoes will come back a few seconds later. It is very important to be very well stacked, because if you're not, then you might get clipped by other players' tornadoes and you will get instantly killed. After you kill these 2 bosses, mount up and fly towards this channeler here in the distance in order to land in a safe area near the last boss. If you go elsewhere around this area, you will get dismounted and then you will waste a load of time trying to dodge trash mobs in order to get to the last mobs, as this is a no-fly zone. Pull the 2 mini-bosses in front of the last boss and cleave them down equally as much as possible, as they both enrage if their friend gets killed, and then gain Raging Kin, dealing 45% extra physical damage and casting 75% faster until you soothe this. But it will get recast, so make sure to have a Soothe class with you or just cleave them down perfectly even. Batak will need a bit more attention due to his Broad Stomp, a frontal cone attack you need to dodge. It's pretty big and it's always on the tank from what we could tell, so try to point him towards a wall or just away from the group. More importantly, he casts Blood Curling Shout, an AoE fear which is the top priority to be interrupted, as it deals a lot of damage and it has a huge 200-yard range and pretty much fears the entire party, which leads to pulling extra mobs and often to a wipe in most pugs. It's the only interruptible cast anyway, so don't miss it. Meanwhile, his buddy Balara will throw a Ravaging Spear at random targets, leaving a swirly on the floor which you should move out of. He also casts a Vehement Charge, Vehement? At the closest target, fixating on them, so you should bait this towards a nearby wall, like this fence here, to keep them stacked for cleaving and move out of the charge before the end of the cast. We are now finally at the last boss. First of all, I recommend tanking him next to this rock here in both phases. One player will get targeted with a red arrow and a circle around them, followed by an Iron Spear cast from the boss. Place the circle on the opposite side of the rock. The boss will throw his spear at the target, dealing damage and pushing them back, and then he will cast an Iron Stampede, charging to pick up his spear, but he will be stopped by the rock, thus not damaging players with it and remaining stationary for better uptime. Try not to be in his path as he will deal large amounts of damage and knock you away. You can also place the circle in front of the rock and thus not get pushed back, but you will have to be really quick to get out of his way then, and it's a little bit more dangerous but not impossible. He will also occasionally cast a Rendering Strike, dealing physical damage and leaving a 10-second bleed on the tank, so pop a defensive tanks. This will also increase the tank's damage taken from the next attack, Savage Strike, by 500%. Dodge his Upheaval Frontal Cone, as getting caught in it will most likely kill you in combination with the damage done by the circle he places around you. It's pretty vital to spread out at this point and not clip other players with the circles. The boss will start casting Siphon Power around 60% health, becoming immune and making his 4 adds attackable, also slowly pushing players away from him. Interrupt and push the adds together for better cleave and nuke them down fast while stopping as many casts as possible. Having a Vengeance Demon Hunter or a Death Knight here makes the intermission much easier. Also, move out of the lightning swirlies on the floor as they hurt pretty bad, and luckily they now spawn a little bit less than they did in previous seasons, where you didn't even have the time to finish a cast. When all the adds are down, the boss will enter phase 2, where his attacks will be buffed with storm powers. Continue dodging the lightning swirlies on the floor while dealing with his empowered attacks. His tank attack is now Conductive Strike, dealing nature damage and leaving a dot as before, and increasing their damage taken by 500% from his next attack, Thunder Strike. Warriors, rejoice, as you can spell reflect the Conductive Strike debuff. For all the other tanks, healers, please dispel them quickly before the Thunder Strike comes along. The spears he throws at players are now called Static Spear, but they should still be placed on the other side of the rock. The boss will throw the spear at the player, but instead of pushing him away on hit, all the other players in the group will be gripped into him, so all of you will need to move out of there quickly before the boss casts his Iron Stampede towards you to pick up his spear again. And lastly, his frontal is now called Crackling Upheaval, which besides the usual frontal cone attack and AoE circle on each player, it will also drop a pool under each player at the end of the cast, dealing damage to anyone standing in it, so make sure to quickly move out and not to stack them together. That's pretty much it for the Nokhud Offensive Guide. I hope it provided some new interesting tips for you, or that one friend that always dies to mechanics or not doing the mechanics. I know you all have that one friend. And if you know some more tricks for this dungeon, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy watching WoW guides, tips, tricks, and such content, don't forget to subscribe and maybe even come say hi when I live stream either on YouTube or on Twitch. See you in the next one. Bye!